people ask me, what is the demographic for a conspiracy theory believer? And the demographic is already believing conspiracy theories. If there's one thing that hits you in a way that dovetails with the biases that you already have, something's going to grab you. Something is going to go, oh, I haven't thought about that. That makes a lot of sense. These things excel at finding fertile ground, and that fertile ground is seeded by sometimes decades of alternative beliefs and often failures and setbacks and traumas.
Mike Rothschild, you are a journalist at the intersection of the internet and politics. What makes that space so filled with conspiracy theories?
Well, they're kind of the same thing right now. I think any notion that, online discourse or conspiracy memes or things that are getting passed around on social media, any notion that that's not the real world, that's just internet stuff, it doesn't matter, we can ignore it. I think that's long gone. There is no distinction between the internet, between politics, between culture, and increasingly between conspiracism. You now have an entire generation of people where maybe they don't believe something that's fringe or unevidenced, but they probably know somebody who does. And this stuff that was once, really pushed away by mainstream society, including mainstream politicians, is now everywhere and is really one of the principal drivers of commerce and politics right now.
Yeah. And just to clarify, what is your definition of a conspiracy theory?
That's a great question. And I think when you talk about conspiracy theories, one of the reactions that you inevitably get is, oh, you're saying there's no such thing as conspiracies. Conspiracies are very real. That's anytime multiple people are planning something against somebody else. So you go all the way back to the assassination of Julius Caesar. That was a conspiracy. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was a conspiracy. The cigarette companies working together to hide the harmful effects of their product, that's a conspiracy. Those are all real. A conspiracy theory is a theorized version of one of those that depends on evidence that is never proven to exist. So you have, something harmless like Bigfoot or UFOs. I mean, you could say maybe those are urban legends or something like that. Or, in today's politics, something like chemtrails, the idea that, jetliners are spraying us with chemicals. You can see them in the sky and those little white lines. What are they doing to us? That's a conspiracy theory. It's a classic conspiracy theory. It keeps getting dredged up over and over. So a conspiracy theory is simply a theorized version of one of those plots.
Mm-hmm. And how is this different from getting into a cult? I've talked with Rick Alan Ross, and he says that the videos that are used nowadays to indoctrinate people for cults that seem to be similar to the videos that are used to spread conspiracy theories.
There's a great deal of overlap. And one of the things you find in something like QAnon, which I've written extensively about and since it started in late 2017, is those videos have a very hypnotic aspect to them, and they're produced very slickly. I think the days of the 2-hour straight to camera ramble about the police state, we're not doing that so much. Some people still are, but now conspiracy videos are short, they're well produced, they're slick, they pull you in with very broad questions and statements. So one of the most popular QAnon videos is this video called The Plan to Save the World. And it opens with this narrator kind of gravely intoning, do you ever wonder why you can't get ahead in life? And that's kind of everybody at one point or another. And so you're watching that and you go, oh yeah, I have wondered about that. And it's a very similar technique to what cults use, to what fringe religions use, to what scams use. This idea of a very simple, very broad question that you are probably going to say yes to, that pulls you into the deeper, more complicated stuff. It doesn't hit you with the truly crazy, complicated, unfollowable stuff right away because you push that away. It hits you with something that's very simple that you're probably going to have felt at one point or another in your life.
Mm-hmm. And such an attractive thing too to get over some big problem that you're feeling.
Right.
Yeah, very difficult. So cults have a leader. With conspiracy theories, it doesn't seem quite so clear. Who do you think leads these things?
There are many different conspiracy theories that have a leader figure in them. If you look again at something like QAnon, you could say, well, Trump is kind of the leader, or Q is the leader, or military intelligence is the leader. But what Q people will say is something like, well, we're the only cult that teaches you to think for yourself. We don't have a leader. Anybody can leave at any time. We don't tell people what to think. And if you're telling people, well, we teach you to think for yourself, that's probably a cult. But you don't have that kind of traditional figure who demands obedience and then increasingly demands time and money and attention. What you have is a set of ideas that can be kind of repurposed and recreated in any particular way you want them to be. Something like QAnon is very malleable. Not every Q believer believes every aspect of it. Some of them actively reject certain aspects of it. But ultimately, you have the same shared core of beliefs, this idea of the secret war between good and evil, these mysterious drops that are, showcasing classified intelligence that nobody else understands. So, in a sense, every person becomes the leader of their own version of the conspiracy. And that's what makes it so compelling and so difficult to get people out of.
Right. And then if you're the leader of your own little version, you want to infect the people around you. So who do these things target when they're spreading these conspiracy theories?
Conspiracism really targets people at points in their life when they're very vulnerable.
Hmm.
The right conspiracy theory or the right piece of conspiracy theory media can really hit anybody if it hits them at the right time in the right way. We've seen many different examples of people binging a whole night's worth of QAnon videos or anti-vax videos or Pizzagate videos or whatever the conspiracy theory is. They start off with, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about the Federal Reserve or 5G technology or whatever it is. And the YouTube algorithm feeds them stuff that continues to draw them a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper because the algorithm wants to keep you watching because that's how they make their ad money. So you keep getting something that's a little bit further down the rabbit hole until 10 hours later, you're watching like Holocaust denial videos or something. You don't even know how you got there. But suddenly the entire way that you see the world has been rewired. It hits you if you are feeling persecuted, if you're feeling like you've had a great loss in your life or a great trauma in your life, you've been hit with an unexpected medical bill, an unexpected breakup, an unexpected job loss, and you're looking for answers and some reason why this happened to you. And conspiracy theories excel at providing you with reasons why something happened and who is to blame for them.
Yeah, I'm very curious about the personal influence that this has on people's lives, which you have some great stories in your book here about QAnon. And it reminds me a lot of when people get involved with someone who has narcissistic personality disorder or a psychopath, and they're usually vulnerable. They're going through a divorce, they're grieving a death, something like that. And then this sort of magic person shows up and says, I know the answers, and they kind of mesmerize the target and then spend more and more time with the target and slowly begin to overwhelm them. Is it similar?
It's very similar. It works very similar to that. Conspiracy theories work because they hit you with an absolute barrage of nonsense. And if it's one thing, you go, "Oh, that doesn't sound right. I don't believe that." But if it's thing after thing after thing, something's going to grab you. Something
Yeah.
is going to go, "Oh, that, yeah. Oh, I haven't thought about that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Why did all the Jews, get phone calls to leave on 9/11? They didn't. But if there's one thing that hits you in a way that dovetails with the biases that you already have and the things you already believe in. People ask me, what is the demographic for a conspiracy theory believer? And the demographic is already believing conspiracy theories. If you think that the Clintons have this long list of people that they've had assassinated and the central banks have been controlling our lives and fund all of the wars through their Jewish proxies, QAnon's going to come across your social media feed and you're going to go, oh yeah, that dovetails completely with what I already believe. Whereas if you don't believe those things, QAnon comes to you and you go, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Only an idiot would believe this. So it really, these things excel at finding fertile ground, and that fertile ground is seeded by sometimes decades of alternative beliefs and often failures and setbacks and traumas.
Yeah. And what did you say there, Mike? They target people. The best way to target someone for a conspiracy theory is someone who already believes in conspiracy
Yeah.
theories.
The most vulnerable person to a new conspiracy theory is somebody who already believes in them. The vast majority of people are going to push this stuff away because it just sounds crazy to them and it doesn't fit with their worldview. But there are people who have spent their entire lives marinating, maybe not in specific conspiracy theories, but in grievance and in feeling like the system is out to get them, politicians are out to get them, experts are all liars, the media are all liars. Conspiracy theories and the big conspiracy theory influencers will essentially play on those beliefs and they will tell you things that are very specific that fit with those beliefs that you already have. And a lot of these people are very good at couching their statements and their shows and their broadcasts and their podcasts to be very general but also very specific. So they're very tailored to people who already believe all this stuff. But if you're just kind of stumble across this, or if somebody sends you a 2-minute clip of Alex Jones bloviating about something, you're going to go, oh, that really fits. That guy gets it. That guy's articulating something that I've thought for a long time, but I've never been able to talk about. And that's really where this stuff works, is this idea of he's saying the things that I've always just believed but never been able to articulate.
Wow, that is powerful. I've seen one of these guys in action, and it seems that he tests people to see if they have sort of belief systems that already lend themselves to being pushed a little closer to the edge of that cliff that is the rabbit hole that is down into these conspiracy theories. Have you seen people get radicalized? Like, I know you've talked to people after they've come through the experience or interviewed people when they're in it, but have you seen the process?
Oh, sure. It's you can see it play out on social media.
Yeah.
You can see people go from, oh, this guy is interesting. He's got some interesting ideas to you are a full-on hardcore conspiracy believer, usually pushing anti-Semitic or racist ideas, even if you don't consider yourself racist or anti-Semitic, because so much of this stuff is based in scapegoating and othering and blaming other people. Many new conspiracy theory converts are very public about the sort of conversion process that they're going through. It's the sort of proselytizing that any new convert to anything will sort of foist upon you, whether it's religion or whether it's, hey, I just discovered the Grateful Dead and now I can't stop talking about it. There are people for whom, hey, I just discovered QAnon. I just discovered Alex Jones. I just discovered David Icke. This guy tells it like it is. I'm reading everything by them and I want to share it with you. It's like I've discovered this amazing new thing and I want to give it to other people. And this new thing is not new at all, but it's also very harmful and does a great deal of damage to people.
Yeah. So that person who is telling others, what kind of person is it that is pushing things the hardest when they're sharing it with others?
It's usually somebody who has been looking for something in their life, something that explains why things are the way they are. And it sometimes they find this one video or this one podcast episode or whatever it is, and they suddenly realize this is the key. This I've never been able to articulate this, and now I understand it. And I want to share it with the world. And then on the flip side of that, you have the professional conspiracy theory influencer. You have somebody who's paying their bills, paying their mortgage, making sure their water stays on, depends on pushing these things as loudly and as prolifically as they can. And I've seen that happen too. There's a conspiracy theory called de-evolution or devolution. That basically, like, Donald Trump was secretly in control of the government this whole time. The whole time that Joe Biden was president, Donald Trump was actually president, and he's going to reveal it to the world. And you can see in all these signs and all these tweets and executive orders and all this other stuff. The guy who started pushing this was just a guy. I actually figured out who he was. He was a guy who worked at a Catholic school. I think it was in North Dakota. And he was just sort of bored with his life and wasn't really going anywhere. And he found this thing online and started coming up with all these ideas and trying to figure out why things were the way they were and how Donald Trump could possibly have lost the 2020 election. And he started writing about this, and he developed a fan base. And now it's his job. And he has like a whole like YouTube network and podcast network and like employees who work for him, and all based on this idea that had no evidence that I was able to kind of falsify pretty easily. But if you're desperate for answers and if you're looking for somebody to tell you what's going on and who did it to you, you glom onto this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. His fans don't know what they're talking about. But if you all get a bunch of people who don't know what they're talking about together, you can sort of move as a mass toward a kind of phony enlightenment where you think you have the answer, but really you're just spinning your wheels and giving some guy your money.
Yeah. So, what distinguishes the true believer from someone who knows it's fake and is kind of running a scam?
I always hesitate to try to figure out if people actually believe this stuff or if it's just sort of a grift that they've bought into. One of the things I talk about in Storm is Upon Us is this the guy Neon Revolt, he was the big QAnon influencer, and he just disappeared after January 6th. He just kind of vanished. He got unmasked, and he's just gone. He has no real presence anymore. But I was able to go back through some of his early social media and find that the ideas that he was espousing under this code name, this really hardcore QAnon stuff, very racist, very anti-Semitic stuff, it was really just an extension of his personality. His pre-QAnon social media was the same as it was post. It's just sort of wrapped up in this character. So I think for a lot of people, conspiracy belief is an articulation of something that they already believed. I think there's very few conspiracy influencers who are just like, they turn the camera off and they're like, oh, I can't believe how stupid these people are. Once in a while, it slips through. There's a
Yeah.
big conspiracy QAnon influencer who goes by Praying Medic. And before QAnon, he was just like, he was making like spiritual healing videos and get like 1,000 views. And then he started writing a lot about QAnon, and he was like a celebrity in that world. And he will talk about this stuff. He'll do QAnon videos even now where it's clear that this was all just nonsense. And you watch him kind of broadcast, and he has this smirk on his face, like this kind of little sly smile of like, I can't believe I'm getting away with this. I can't believe these people still believe this stupid crap. But at the same time, I don't think you could fully immerse yourself in that world and not believe at least some aspect of it. So I think there are degrees of belief, from the sort of hardcore believer who's ready to, strap up their guns and go, fight the federal government, to the influencer who just doesn't believe any of it. I think most people believe at least some aspect of it. It's just that they definitely know how to play up the most outlandish aspects of it for their audiences if they don't necessarily believe all of that stuff.
Mm. Yeah, I do wonder about the personality that pushes this. And I wonder too if there is some, like that guy with the smirk, some amount of sadism, some amount of joy in destabilizing others. There are people like that in the world. What do you see of the mood among this group? I mean, it just seems dark.
They are miserable people. They're miserable, joyless, deeply, deeply unhappy people. A lot of their social media threads are about how their family all hates them now, and they can't listen to any of the music they used to love. They can't watch sports anymore. They can't watch movies anymore. They can't watch TV. All they see is the Satanism and they're distracting us from the real issues, and like, oh, they're infecting us with their wokeness and all that stuff. These are people who have kind of left everything in the mainstream behind and have devoted themselves entirely to, research and, red pilling other people and the secret war. And if, you're fighting a secret war between good and evil to save all the children of the world, TV or like basketball suddenly doesn't have a lot of appeal to you anymore. But those are the things that most people enjoy. Those are the things that
Yeah.
we do on our off time to connect with other people or to enjoy something that is outside of our own lives that maybe we don't necessarily have any control over, but we don't want control over it. We want to watch somebody else do something. We want somebody else to tell us a story once in a while. I think when you're a conspiracy theory believer, that stuff doesn't hold any meaning for you anymore because you feel like you're fighting the most important battle of all time, and nobody else gets it. Your family doesn't get it. Your friends don't get it. And these people kind of almost delight in showing off their misery and their loneliness. And, my family didn't want anything to do with me this Christmas, but I've got my QAnon family. And there's a lot of stuff like that. And you can see just how unhappy conspiracism has made all of these people, but I think a lot of them don't really want to be happy. They don't think they deserve to be happy. And you can see it now, as we go through the second term of Trump. A lot of these people feel like they've gotten everything they want, but they're still unhappy. They're still complaining all the time. They still feel like, well, the pieces are all still falling into place and we got to push even harder now. They don't ever let themselves enjoy any kind of moment, even for a second, because, well, you're fighting the most important battle there is. Who has time for anything else?
And in your book too, you said that boomers are very important to the spreading of this message. What's the distinction with targeting boomers and using them?
So early on with QAnon, there was a really concerted effort to bring older people to 4chan, which is not a good idea on so many levels. But for a lot of people, a lot of older people are still used to, or maybe they were, maybe in the last decade, and it's changed a little bit now, hopefully. But you were still used to people who said, well, if it's on the news, it's the truth. And if my favorite newspaper says it, it's real. And if this influencer who I've discovered, if he says it, well, I trust him. And so therefore it has to be the truth. So a lot of people, and especially a lot of older conservatives who've gone through decades of politics becoming more progressive and culture especially becoming more progressive, we're looking for a way to fight back against it. If have lived your life over the last 30 years and suddenly it's like all of these cultural norms are changing and suddenly you can't say certain words anymore and you can't tell certain jokes anymore and you can't refer to some people the way you used to refer to them, and you're like, well, I'm not a racist, I'm not a sexist, I just want to be able to use these certain words and not get canceled. I don't want the internet coming after me. And Q is working towards bringing it all back and making things safer and better. You feel like that's an attractive prospect, especially when you had somebody like Donald Trump leading it, who you felt like was very much of your generation, who had the same kind of cultural touchstones you did. He likes to tell the same jokes that you tell. He likes, well, let's call the Washington football team. We got to bring back that old name. I don't, it wasn't out of hate. It's just what we used to call it. And what's wrong with that? There's a certain amount of things are changing too fast, and I want to stand up against it. And something like QAnon is a culturally very regressive movement. It's sort of like we're going to bring it back to the way it used to be. Well, the way it used to be maybe wasn't so great for a lot of people, but you want to bring it back to the things that were good for you and feel like, well, I'm not a hateful person. I just want it the way it was when I was a kid. And there's a lot of power and appeal behind something like that. And I think QAnon was very good at weaponizing that.
Mm. So what good does this bring people?
Nothing. It doesn't bring anybody. It doesn't bring any good for anyone. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you have a sense of community, like you are fighting a battle that needs to be fought to save the most vulnerable people. Makes you feel like you have friends everywhere. You've got compadres all around the world. We're all on Twitter together fighting the battle. But really what it does is it isolates you. It pushes you away from your friends, from your family, from the kind of normal, square, boring world that most of the rest of us live in most of the time. And it puts you in the middle of something very exciting and very compelling. And there's danger and there's secrets. QAnon for a lot of people, it takes on the appearance of almost of sort of fun and enjoyment and sort of like working together and to be a part of this very compelling good versus evil story, but it's all dust. It's all fake. And at some point it unmasks itself as fake. And you've gone so far inside it. You're so deeply embedded in the community that you don't feel like you can leave, and you don't feel like you want to leave. You don't want to leave your friends behind. You don't want to leave behind this big story that you're part of. And for a lot of people, it comes down to why it's so difficult to get people out of cultic movements, even when these cultic movements promise something that does not deliver. It's because you don't have anything else at that point. There's this, the great book, When Prophecy Fails, from the 1950s, which is an academic study of a UFO cult that promised a small group of believers who would be taken away by an alien ship in advance of a great flood. there was no flood, there was no alien ship, but the people who were part of this didn't leave the cult behind. Well, they're like, well, maybe the ship didn't appear today, but what if it appears tomorrow? And if I've left, well, I'm going to miss out and I'm just going to drown in the flood like everybody else. So you feel like I don't want to miss out. And I don't want to leave behind all the friends that I've made and go back to the world where I just have to pay my bills and be around all these normies who are just asleep to everything. So there's this almost this smugness to it, this feeling like I know something the rest of the world doesn't know, and I don't want to leave that behind.
Yeah, it's a huge loss of entertainment and of a social network.
Yeah,
It seems around this, a bunch of, seemingly like-minded people.
yeah.
So with cults and with relationships with abusive, narcissistic psychopath types, if you choose to get away, you are often smeared by the
Mhm.
group. And they will maybe give you a name, call you, a Luciferian. You are on the outside of the cult now. You are evil, or you become the enemy of people who are close to the narcissist. Um, with something like a conspiracy theory like QAnon, they have a system like that for people who defect.
It's not quite so cut and dried.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Q believers will say things like, "Well, you're free to just leave it behind at any time,
Mm-hmm.
but why would you want to? Why
Mm-hmm.
would you want to go back to the world of the Satanist pedophiles with their, false flags and their fake entertainment and their child trafficking? Why would you want to be part of that?" So there is a lot of like, you can leave, but if you do, you're just going to be part of that other world. You're not going to be here to watch us together when the storm happens and all the bad people get swept away. And there are a lot of attacks on former Q believers. There's a lot of infighting within conspiracy theory communities that so and so is fake, or they're a Fed, or they're not a true believer, or they're a plant or a shill. I mean, there's all that kind of infighting. These movements are constantly sort of warring with each other, and you see it all the time with conspiracy influencers. This kind of like, you're not the real truth teller, I'm the real truth teller. That other one is just a shill. They just want your money, but I'm telling the truth. But ultimately, these movements work because they get you to want to stay. There's not a physical abuse aspect of it. You're not sort of locked away in a compound somewhere. What it is you're locked away in a community that's all over the place and that you don't want to leave, because if you leave that community, you just have to go back to the people who you've spent months or years telling them are sort of sheep and losers, and they don't know what's going on, they don't want to know. You don't want to be a normal person, you want to be part of the special group. And I think that's really where that coercive aspect of it comes in. It's not so much like if you leave we're going to hunt you down. It's if you leave you're going to miss out. And that kind of FOMO is a really powerful part of conspiracism.
Yeah, and then the infighting, very much again like the relationship with the narcissist. They like to isolate individuals and tell them, oh, so and so said something bad about you, and I don't know, and people are always fighting for their attention to be closer to the king. So I wonder, Mike, are you familiar with the term gaslighting?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
this sounds like a sort of mass gaslighting. Is there a connection there that you see?
Oh, it is. It's very much a working people around a delusion and telling them that all of the things that go wrong and all of the ways that the prophecy fails are actually part of the prophecy. And early on in QAnon, there was this kind of mass gaslighting where the first couple of months of, or maybe the first couple of weeks really, of QAnon were a very specific thing. Hillary Clinton is going to be arrested between like November 3rd and November 6th. And then like the US Marshals are going to get called up and the National Guard's going to be in the streets, and there's going to be chaos and panic and mass arrests and total upheaval. You're going to have Antifa going door to door, grabbing people. But at the end, it's going to be great. And like Trump's going to win and everything's going to be awesome. Well, November 4th or whatever it is comes, nothing happens. And then QAnon starts making these posts of, well, when we said Hillary Clinton, we actually meant Saudi Arabia. And like, I don't know how you could gaslight people more than that. Like, the most transparent lie that you could possibly voice on people. This whole thing of like, how stupid do you think these people are? And a lot of Q believers are like, oh, okay, cool. Can't wait to see what happens next. And you're like, how do you divorce yourself of reality that much? But that's what happens when you become so invested in an idea, which is, Hillary and Obama and George Soros going to the gallows, and you're like, oh no, that was never going to happen, but it's going to happen. Like most normal people go, I can't believe I bought into this. How dumb could I be? But it's very difficult to get people to admit that they've been misled.
Yes.
And getting people to admit that they've been fooled is so hard. And the people making these posts and exploiting these posts, they understand that. You don't need a kind of network of intelligence operatives to understand that people want their enemies to be punished and they don't want to admit they've been misled. And those are very kind of core doctrines to QAnon. So when Q goes, no, 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 it was actually about the Saudi royal family this whole time. How could you think it was about Hillary Clinton? Most people go, you're an idiot. And a few people go, oh, wow, this goes deeper than I thought.
Yeah, that's the thrill of it.
Yeah.
Oh man, Mike, the cult leaders or narcissist personality that I've seen, when something like this would happen, he would very much pull in this prophetic, apocalyptic kind of thing too. He would have these thought-killing phrases like a cult will have and
Sure.
things, and or he would say, the world ends next month. We got to
Right.
just focus on this next thing. Um, and one thing that he was always into was sort of the puzzles in the world.
Sure.
What is it about social media, the puzzle element, that makes the conspiracy theory so good for social media?
Well, QAnon especially excelled at that puzzle aspect of it. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that really set it apart from some of the past iterations of Q like conspiracy theories, and also, centuries of conspiracy theory books, which were like, here's who the Illuminati is, here's what they're doing to you. I know all the secrets, but you can't do anything about it. They're unstoppable. All you can know is sort of like when it's eventually going to fall apart, and like you're on the outside, you're just a pawn in this. QAnon was your part of this. We're going to take these drops, these puzzles, these codes and ciphers and riddles, we're going to figure them out together. And so decoding the Q drops became a huge part of what drove Q in those first couple of years. It was like, here is this random string of questions, and or this, at times it was like strings of letters, and it was actually, you could analyze it where it was literally somebody banging on a keyboard, like left, right, left, right, left, right. But it takes on this air of profundity, and you're going like, this is the key, we're going to figure it all out together. Now, of course, QAnon and conspiracism is so mainstream that it doesn't need that anymore. It doesn't need the puzzles, it doesn't need the codes and the ciphers. And you have Donald Trump who just says all this stuff, and people go, okay, yep, we're doing it. You don't need long strings of rhetorical questions, because now you have like the most powerful people in the world talking about this stuff. But the puzzle solving aspect of it really brought people together in a way that kind of had that outsider status. And there are some people who are still very much into decoding the Q drops as a kind of scripture. Like when Q said this on, August 8th, 2019, he really meant something that was going to happen, June 4th, 2025. And you're like, that's ridiculous. There's no thought put into this whatsoever. But the same way people go back to holy scriptures and find new meanings in them, and very powerful meanings in them, people go back to Q drops and go, oh no, this thing said 6 years ago actually meant this. And like, we knew the whole time. And that secret knowledge aspect of QAnon, it really becomes the thing that powers it. This idea of, I've known this whole time what's going on, and ha 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 ha. The rest of you, you're surprised. I'm not surprised. I knew it the whole time.
Yeah. And that's so attractive to building a team because,
Yeah.
well, we need an expert in this, we need an expert in that. I keep pulling on the examples that I've seen, but the guy that I saw, he convinced people that he was seeing puzzles in the social media posts of celebrities that were actually
Mm-hmm.
allowing him to pick winners in gambling on sports. And
Mm-hmm.
then he said that he had a Discord group and he was building a team of experts. And they were going to be experts in cryptology and history and all of these different things so that they
Yeah.
could together decipher the code, gamble on sports, and get really rich. I just,
That's yep. Sounds about right.
this
Just
is the way it works. So with all of this, the words of these people, or the words in the case of QAnon, I mean, literally words, these drops
yeah.
are a weapon. spoken with a woman, Jennifer Young. She wrote a great book called Women Who Love Psychopaths. And
Mm,
she talks about how words are their weapon.
yep.
So the counter to that some groups have tried is censorship. What do we
Mhm.
know about social media censorship, blocking conspiracy theories, things like that?
It's very tricky, and the one of the biggest things that makes it so difficult is social media companies have a vested interest in getting people to click on things and share things. And conspiracy theories are very shareable. They're very clickable. They generate a lot of traffic, a lot of views, a lot of ad revenue. So social media sites like Facebook, I mean certainly X now, have no real incentive to pull a lot of this stuff down. And of course, it's not up to a social media company to decide what the truth is. And it's not up to a social media company to protect people from themselves. So I think that the relying on any kind of overseer, whether that's government, whether that's corporate, to police conspiracism for us, it's never going to work, and it's really never has worked. Now, deplatforming certain people can work, and I mean we've seen some of the big conspiracy theory gurus, people pushing really hateful, really violent stuff that people should not be exposed to. I don't think. Those people have seen their audiences vanish when they've been pulled off of certain social media networks. And I think social media networks have a right to say, we're not going to necessarily police ideas, but you don't have the right to say that here. You can believe whatever you want, but that doesn't give you the right to shout it all over our platform. It's the same way that a bar can kick somebody out if they're being drunk and abusive and shouting, hateful stuff at people. You can say, well, you can go say it on the street, but in our establishment, you can't say it. So I think, unfortunately, the social media companies are not doing that. So I think for a lot of us, we have to really rely on ourselves to when we see those things to point them out and say, hey, this person is a fraud. This person is hateful. They're pushing a very old, anti-Semitic trope or whatever it is, and really kind of being the ones who kind of clean up our own social media environment. Unfortunately, most people just don't have time, don't necessarily have the interest, or don't really know how to do it.
So it's about individuals. It's about the
Yeah.
platforms keeping track of individuals, but they can't necessarily keep track of ideas.
Yeah, I think, people would tell me, well, why can't we, start arresting the big QAnon gurus? And I would say, for what? They're not doing anything. It's not illegal to spew dumb ideas on 8chan. Like, that's not a crime, and it shouldn't be a crime. But if somebody is posting links to the protocols of the elders of Zion, or a really insane anti-vaccine video, a social media platform has the right to say, we don't allow that on our platform. And I don't think that's censorship. I think that's enforcing terms of service to make the platform as safe and palatable for as many people as possible. I don't think banning ideas from the global marketplace works or is appropriate, but I think social media platforms having rules and enforcing them, it really would be appropriate if they had rules and enforced them.
Do you think this conversation will be, diminished on platforms like YouTube because of the words that
Uh,
we've used?
I mean, I hope not, and I think that there are ways to be overzealous about this. And I think there was I think when Twitter really did start banning QAnon, they actually also were blocking links to stories about QAnon. They were blocking links to the Q drops. And I think like there is a very fine line between glorifying something and studying it and talking about it in an academic or journalistic way. I think talking about something in an academic or journalistic way should always be allowed. I think glorifying something or spreading it in a one-sided way, I think is something that platforms should look twice at. It's just that you need a human to do that. And I mean, unless you have a really advanced AI doing your moderation, but I think even an AI struggles with intent and with context. So I think a conversation about why do people believe QAnon is very different than an hour long video about how Q predicted John McCain's death. Those are two different things, and I think one should always be allowed, and I think the other should be looked at with a certain amount of scrutiny.
Hmm. Sounds very difficult. And
Yeah.
if the trick is the strategy is to pick individuals who are really promoting this stuff. The individual is often the best manager of their own reputation, and
Yeah.
they could say, well, no, I present so many good things, and I teach people about other stuff, and they win over and attract people. They bring an audience to the platform.
Yeah.
Is there a way to find who's a good actor and who's not? When I'm sure, in this space there is deception and there is posturing.
Oh, sure. And a lot of the big influencers in conspiracy theories and the big, authors in conspiracies going back centuries have always been like, I'm just presenting the truth. I'm just saying what my research has uncovered. Or, if you have, this is a trick that a lot of anti-Semitic books would use, where they would say, well, we're not talking about all Jews. We're just talking about the rich and powerful ones who are oppressing everybody. We should all be rising up against those people. I found a lot of this stuff when I wrote my book about the Rothschilds, who I'm not related to. I always have to say that. You would have these books that would just viciously attack Jewish wealth, but they would always say, well, the great mass of Jewish people are being oppressed by these Jews the same way as everybody else. So it's almost like you have to really understand what these people are saying and sometimes what they're not saying. And it becomes extremely difficult to kind of figure out what the truth is. And of course, all that's by design. All of that is a way to get you questioning the very basics of what you know to be true or what you think you know to be true.
And we're talking about people thinking hard. This is not a thinking project, though. This is about emotion in a lot of ways, it
Right.
seems.
Right.
What are the emotional triggers that it's trying to pull?
The emotional triggers are really the same now as they were thousands of years ago with conspiracism. When people were watching the Great Fire of Nero and going, "Oh, must have been set on purpose, to get us to do something." Conspiracy theories are always going to fill an emotional hole in people. They're always going to provide explanations for things that don't make sense. They're always going to provide order in a time of chaos. They're going to provide certainty when you feel like you don't know what's going on, and they're going to provide someone who did it when it feels like it just happened at random. If you're walking down the street and an air conditioner falls on your head, you want to believe that somebody pushed it on you, that you have enemies and have earned the ire of someone to the point where they would push an air conditioner on your head rather than just, I had the really bad luck of being in the worst possible place at the worst possible time, and there's no reason at all why this happened. We want to believe in cosmic designs and in plots and schemes. That's why conspiracies are so compelling, because we want to believe somebody's in charge. A lot of the time, nobody's in charge, or they are and they're just not very good at it, and they're just bad at their jobs, and they just allowed things to get out of control without any oversight. Or it was just bad luck, just bad timing, bad roll of the dice. But conspiracy theories take that randomness out of it and provide a kind of design to everything. And that's very appealing to people who are going through a very difficult time. It's why conspiracy theories really sprout in times of kind of national trauma or upheaval.
Yeah, it's so attractive. I think when you're desperate to grab onto something, and
Yeah.
people really go looking for that. So we've got these emotions. Now there is a semi logic that something masquerading as logic. The idea that future proves past
Yeah.
and all of this. What's
Yeah.
that quasi logic?
So that whole, and it's a thought terminating cliche.
Yeah.
This idea that we're saying something that seems totally crazy now, but what happens in the future will prove that this was correct. So it's basically saying, like, watch this space. The thing that's going to happen later on down the road is going to prove this whole thing right, and is going to prove that you were right to believe in it the whole time. So it's a way of sort of hanging on, just like wait a little bit longer, and like the thing is going to happen, and then it's all going to be revealed, and you were going to have been right the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I keep pulling up personal examples, but the guy I knew, when something didn't go his way, he would say, "No, no, 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 just wait. You ever seen the movie Unbreakable? Bruce
Yeah.
Willis?" He'd
Yep.
say, "No, no, we're just gonna be like Bruce Willis and Unbreakable. We're just gonna go out and open our arms, and something will come. We'll
Yep.
we'll find the answer, and it will come." And like you said, it's a thought terminating cliche. It would just shut people off and go, "Oh, okay, he
Yep.
knows."
Yep. Oh, he's got it. It's under control. Yeah. That, and Q and a lot of other prophetic movements excel at that. Well, we're only losing now so we can win big later. You're like, why not just win now? I mean, that could help. A lot of times with QAnon, I would push back and go like, why does it take so much effort to save the children and get rid of the bad people? Like, especially like 2018, 2019, 2020, Trump is the president. He could just do it. Like, why does it need to be so complicated? Why do all the I's need to be dotted and the T's need to be crossed? Just do it. Like, why are you waiting so long? Like, more children are suffering as it takes time to do this. Like, where is your sense of urgency? And it will always be, well, it has to be right. We got to do it legally, and it's got to be right, and it's got to be done, where everything happens all at once, and just wait. We just have to wait a little bit longer. And I'm like, why do you have to wait? And they would never have an answer for that.
So the storm never happened with the QAnon story. What's the
There,
significance of the storm never happening?
the significance is that it hasn't happened yet,
Hmm.
and there's always some delay. There's always some like, well, we needed a couple more days, or we needed another week, or it'll happen soon. And lots of Q drops are, big week coming, or soon, or watch the news in 2 days. And it's really keeping people on the hook. And it really, I write about this in Storm, where some of the precursor scams that went into QAnon would always say something like that. You would have like the Iraqi dinars scam, so the sort of sale of Iraqi currency, which is basically worthless. Oh, it's going to revalue to its pre-Gulf War value, and so 1 million dinars is going to be worth $3 million instead of $900. And it was always like, well, the IMF is just getting a few more things into place, or you would get announcements like, well, it's already been announced in the mosques in Iraq, like. They would say that for years. And it's always like one more thing. We got to have one more piece of paper, one more memo. And one of the reasons why I started to get really concerned about QAnon is that it was really kind of wrapping itself around a lot of the conspiracist culture that was going on in 2018 and 2019 with the inspector general report's going to reveal it all, or the Devin Nunes memo, or this piece of testimony by this special counsel that the Clintons are desperate to prevent, and then they killed George H.W. Bush to delay it. And like, when is it going to happen? Why does it take so long? Like, what are we waiting for? And there's always just that one more thing that needs to happen, and it's just how you keep people on the hook for it.
Right. And they get a little hit when, oh, no, it
Yep.
wasn't Hillary Clinton. It was Saudi Arabia. Oh,
Right.
okay.
They
We
get
got
that.
something.
Yeah, that little hit, or one of
Yeah.
the predictions will come true in some super vague kind of way. And it's another thing I write about in the book with John McCain's death.
Yeah.
And a lot of Q believers are like, Q predicted it 30 days later, down to the second. How can you possibly deny that's real? And I'm like, well, it's not real, and that's not actually what Q said. And if you looked at it with any sense of objectivity, rather than I want this to be true, therefore it's true, you would understand that Q is throwing darts, and sometimes you're going to hit a bullseye. Most of the time, you're not. If you hit a bullseye randomly, it doesn't make you a professional dart player.
And there's damage too in getting lots of people to believe something that is wrong and getting them to spread it of all kinds. One thing that I hadn't thought about until I read your book, all the child trafficking tips
Sure.
that actually affect policing. How did that work?
Oh, sure. There, organizations were flooded with bogus child trafficking tips, with leads, with suspects, and a lot of the actual organizations fighting child trafficking were like, "This is making things so much worse for us. This is perpetuating old myths. This is giving us information that has no value. This is clogging up our very limited resources." And people who actually cared about trafficking would not do that, but they don't care about trafficking in like why it actually happens and why children go missing and what happens to most of them. Most of them go home very quickly. They care about this conspiracy version of these grand Luciferian trafficking rings, and like, oh, Tom Hanks put a picture of a glove on Instagram. That means he's a pedophile and part of the Jeffrey Epstein ring. It's like, no, it doesn't. But if you want to believe that it does, and if you believe that this secret war is going on also sort of right in front of you, then you're going to call up your local trafficking hotline and go, Tom Hanks posted a picture of a glove. And if hundreds of thousands of people call you, those tips have to be run down because you never know. But it's wasting people's time. And it's actually made things much more difficult for a lot of these organizations.
I'm like, how do we know if we're being fed a conspiracy theory?
It's a really good question. I think for most people who are not going to believe in this stuff, if it requires a buy-in into something that makes no sense to you and that actually actively contravenes the
Yeah.
things that you know to be true, pretty good chance it's a conspiracy theory. If it operates in a way that is feeding you information but only part of it and wants, more time or more money from you to get the rest of it, probably a conspiracy theory. If it depends on a kind of ancient scapegoat, whether it's Jews or whether it's black people, or now more recently whether it's transgender people or it's immigrants, and it depends on a sort of system of blame and scapegoating that puts those people at the center of a vast plot being orchestrated by a dark cabal, probably a conspiracy theory.
All very good cues to look for. So you've written about how to get people out. What are some steps that people could take if they see someone close to them who they believe has really fallen for a conspiracy theory?
It's difficult because I think we all want to rescue the people who we know that believe in these things, but there's no requirement to do that. If you have a conspiracy theory believer, a cult believer in your family or your friends, you don't have to do anything. And chances are it's probably better if you don't. Don't try to debate them. Don't try to debunk your way out of it. Don't belittle or mock them because it's only going to push them in deeper because it feeds that sense of grievance that cults and conspiracy theories really excel at. But what you can do is if you see somebody close to you and they do start to maybe question some of it, that's a good time to reach out. And that's a good time to just say, hey, checking in on you, want to see how you were doing. You can gently probe them with some of the stuff that's going on. I think right now we're seeing a lot of this Jeffrey Epstein stuff going on, and you're seeing, QAnon, which is this movement built around bringing people like Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and all the people in their orbit to justice. And now suddenly it's like you're seeing a lot of these figures in that world go like, Ghislaine Maxwell, she didn't do anything wrong. She deserves a pardon. That's a good time to call up your friend who has been part of this and go, what do you think about this? Do you really do you think these people really have your best interests in mind? Do you think these people are saying things that can be trusted? And if they go, yep, I'm in 100%, you go, okay, cool. Talk to you in a year. And you hang up. But if they're like, yeah, no, this really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I just don't really know what to do. That's a person who you can start to rebuild a relationship with and start to talk about things, not necessarily the conspiracy, but just sort of like what's going on in worlds where you used to enjoy things together. Maybe it's a new movie that came out that, hey, you used to be into that stuff together, or a new TV show, or a new season of a sports team, or whatever it is. Just something very, very plain and very just sort of anodyne that you can use to kind of start to build that connection. And as the conspiracy theory demands more pretzel logic from them, and you are talking to them more about things that are just sort of easy to talk about and non-threatening, then the world of the conspiracy starts to seem less appealing and starts to fall apart to them. But that person has to want to get out of it. They have to want to leave that behind. They have to start to see the cracks in it, and it has to stop making a certain amount of sense to them. And if they don't want to get out of it, ultimately you're going to be fighting a losing battle, and you're going to be wasting your time.
Yeah. So, Mike, I talked with Dan Ariely, who was a target of some of these at some point. He
Mm-hmm.
was, at some point, people were convinced that he and Bill Gates and the Illuminati had begun the pandemic and that sort of thing. You're a Rothschild.
Mm-hmm.
If you're targeted, if you're one of these people who gets targeted with a conspiracy theory, what do you do?
Most of the time, you don't do anything, and it will burn itself out. I've had moments where I've had conspiracy theorists really coming after me.
Hmm.
Coming after me by name on their shows. Alex Jones has come after me,
Yeah.
Steve Bannon. You just sort of hunker down, and it will blow over, and they will find somebody else to be the target, or the intensity will slacken. There are practical steps you can take. Certainly, getting your information offline. I don't really talk about my family or anything like that in any of my books or on social media. Ways that you can kind of protect yourself and your identity. I think that's stuff we should be doing anyway. I think we should probably all be sharing a little bit less about ourselves, making ourselves a little bit harder for viral marketing to go after. But I think if you have a large mass of people coming after you online, don't read it. Don't, by any stretch of the imagination, do not try to fight back against these commenters. They want you to think that they're getting to you. They
Mm-hmm.
want you to think that you're getting angry and that they can provoke a response. For me, I keep my social media notifications really buttoned up. If I don't follow somebody, I generally don't see if they're saying something about me. It's fine. You don't need to know what people are saying about you. For most people, it's going to blow over fairly quickly. Now, if you're like George Soros or if you're Bill Gates or you're Barack Obama, it's not. But at that point, you're in such a lofty status in the world, you don't really need to engage with this stuff anyway. You have more important things to do, and you
Fair.
can have a team of people who can kind of keep you up to date on what's going on, really actually deal with things that might actually be real threats. You can filter out that noise. But I think for most people at the center of a sort of social media dog pile, just try to ignore it the best you can, and it will blow over at some point.
Well, Mike, before I ask my last question, for people who want to get real journalism, where should they look for you online?
So I have a website. It's themikerothschild.com. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at RothschildMD. I've got my books, The Storm is Upon Us, on QAnon. I've got Jewish Space Lasers about that. See, there you go. I've got Jewish Space Lasers about the Rothschild family. You can get those in hardcover, audiobook, Kindle, wherever books are sold. One of the things I've been talking about a lot is we lost our home in the Eaton fire in the Pasadena area. So I've been writing a lot about that. I've got a Patreon. If you can support me while I rebuild my life and try to do this work at the same time, that's very helpful. Just patreon.com/Mike Rothschild. I'm around a lot and doing a lot of work to try to fight back against this stuff. And I really appreciate outlets like you giving me an opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure, Mike. And for people who want to check that stuff out, we'll be sure to put links in the description, especially that Patreon with your home. And Mike,
Awesome.
my final question is, what's a success story that you've seen of someone getting away from a conspiracy theory?
There sadly are not that many, but I do know a few people who have not only gotten out of these things, but have pushed back against them. I have a friend, her name is Stephanie, and she was a hardcore 9/11 truther, deeply into anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, and now she is helping run a nonprofit that's pushing back at some of this stuff. She's very open about kind of what she went through and why this stuff was so appealing. She does a lot of work with the Sandy Hook families to push back against the stuff against them. Her name's Stephanie Kemmerer. But unfortunately, there are not a lot of stories about people who've gotten out of conspiracy theories and really moved past them. It's still a very kind of growing field, and I think a lot of people in the mental health field are really still struggling with how to deal with this stuff. How do you deal with somebody who believes QAnon is sending the messages through their car radio? I mean, maybe it's just sort of basic schizophrenia, but maybe it's a lot more than that. And I think a lot of us are still kind of wrapping our heads around the idea that, yeah, this is just crazy stuff that sounds really stupid, but there's a lot more going on there. And I think we write it off and ignore it at our own peril.
Yeah, Mike, just one last thing I remember in your book is that you wrote too that some people are even able to plead in temporary insanity after committing
Yeah.
violent acts based on being sort of radicalized by these conspiracy theories.
Yeah, there have been a few cases where the insanity defense has been used by people who've committed crimes, sort of in the guise of something like QAnon or when they've believed these things. And I think sometimes, conspiracy theories don't cause mental illness, but they're very good at finding people who are mentally ill and working into these incredibly complicated belief systems that these people have built for themselves. And I think a lot of times you can argue, well, they did this, but they were under the influence of this thing that tapped into these mental illnesses that they already had. And I think it's very complicated because we want these things to be very cut and dry, but a lot of times they're not.
Yeah. Well, Mike Rothschild, for educating us all on a difficult and important topic and for taking this interview with me, thank you so much.
Thank you.
To help raise awareness about narcissistic abuse, please share this video. It helps a lot.